Hello, welcome friends. This video is going to be a discussion video on the top-down shooter series that I did. If you haven't watched the series, then this video, if you're interested in game design, this video by itself will probably be pretty interesting to you regardless. So you don't have to have gone through the series at all. There's a couple things I'll mention that are specific to the series, but in general, it's just going to be me talking about the design of the game that we made and why certain decisions were made for that project, places people can go after that project, or just places people can go in general for different resources and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just gonna be off the top of my noggin, good old-fashioned rambling about design and things like that. So that being said, let's get started. I didn't really make a list of things I wanted to start or to talk about. There were a couple things that I kind of wrote down just that I figured would be important to mention as like topics to get me going. But yeah, that's really it. So first, I think I want to just lead off with, did we make a good game? You know, is it designed pretty well? I think it's all right. Yeah, I think it's okay. I do kind of want to talk about what I think some of its weaknesses are, and obviously a lot of these weaknesses are mostly just going to be because I wanted to make it as easy as possible to learn from, as opposed to making a perfect video game. But I wanted to make it easier to learn, so that way you can take it and improve on it, or if you haven't done it, then you can just listen to this, think about discussion and design, and figure out how you want to improve your games, or, you know, maybe there are things in your games that you haven't really thought about too hard, and maybe you should, so who knows. I think one of the more interesting topics when it comes to this game specifically is the way we chose to do like rate of fire and stuff like that. Now in the stream I started working on like a pretty not great version of ammo counts and picking up ammo and things like that. Mostly not great just because we didn't have a lot of time to mess around with it. But yeah, so that's what we decided to do is we went for basically the balance to be around rate of fire as opposed to limited resources. So obviously the shotgun shoots slower than the pistol, which shoots slower than the machine gun, and you know, any other weapons that we would make, we would want to balance for that reason. I think that can definitely be really fun, but I think balancing something like that can actually be a little deceptively tricky. It seems easy, like, okay, well, if it has a slower rate of fire, it needs to do more damage. If it has a higher rate, it needs to do less damage and stuff like that. But if you balance that too perfectly, then it kind of becomes, what's the point of even having the different weapons, right? Like, just for example, let's say we have a gun that shoots a bullet every single frame of the game, and we'll say it does 1 damage. So if you were to just logically balance it out like a robot from there, you could say, okay, well, a gun that has 5 frames of cooldown in between shots should do 5 times as much damage, and a weapon that takes 10 frames of cooldown should do 10 damage. If you do that, then there's not really a point to having those separate things, you know? So you can imagine in that scenario, pretty much any player would just pick the fastest weapon anyways, because it's equal damage per second, you know, DPS or whatever. And so then you're like, okay, well, you know, maybe the longer it should take, then, you know, it should sort of exponentially increase the amount of damage that it does. So there is more reward. That's totally true, and that works totally fine if you can figure out like an algorithm that has a non-linear multiplier or whatever, you know, meaning, you know, you'd have to use like an exponential increase or something like that, because otherwise if you do that, if you do like a linear increase, then it doesn't really matter, you know, it doesn't really matter if the single bullet does 1 damage and the 5 frame bullet does, you know, we'll say 7 damage instead of 5. If it's linearly increasing the same way with the same formula every time, then you're still going to get the same result, because the 10 frame cooldown would probably ultimately factor out to 14, which is still just twice as much as 5. The only real difference you'd have is the 1-to-1 ratio in the beginning. So, but there's totally ways to do that. So there's something that you could do that we didn't really do. We basically just like eyeballed it for this. You know, I was basically just showing that you can do different damage values and stuff. But you can see how simply DPS balancing can be difficult for balancing this kind of game properly. So there's like tons of ways to deal with that. One of which being, I think the simplest one being, you know, you start every mission with the, you start every level with the pistol maybe, and then any gun you find is just a straight up upgrade, and you have to find them for each level, and you pick them up, and then you just have a better gun, you know. That would be one simple way to do it, but we did actually build in a bunch of ways that we did mitigate this kind of thing, and that was stuff like multiple bullets shot at once, the range that the bullets can go to, and whether or not they can do like the piercing damage. So they have like totally different qualities other than just damage. Now introducing more of those elements does make it harder and harder to balance, but it creates more like interesting gameplay type stuff, I think. It's also one of those things where the players can't so easily balance it in their minds either, even whenever they have their hands on it. I'm sure you've done that before, where you played a game where you have multiple weapons or multiple guns or something like that, multiple combos, and you're doing them, you're like, I can't really tell which of these is better or not. And so that's sort of something that the players will deal with too. But at the same time, it's probably not good to just have the players constantly trying different things and not even understanding if they're doing anything different as far as the effect on the game goes. So now's the part where we have to start thinking about other things, not just the way the weapons work and the way the bullets behave and the damage they do and stuff like that. Now we need to talk about like enemies, right? Enemies and level design. I think the most important thing in game design in general is the harmony between different elements. You can't have your elements fighting each other, and if you design them in a way where they actually support each other, it gets you that, you know, greater than the sum of its parts sort of scenario. So we had relatively simple level design. Basically, the biggest choices we had are whether or not that we would put walls in the way or we would put like pits in the way, you know, like water and holes in the ground. And those two things did have a very different effect on the game. Walls would stop bullets and would stop enemy bullets, and pits wouldn't. But they would both restrict movement the same way. And those two separate things are pretty important differences, and they cause the flow of the game to be completely different. You know, if we just made every single wall area that we had just a tall wall, then it would make the game a lot easier because enemies wouldn't be able to shoot you from across the map and stuff like that. And if we made all of the walls pits, basically, then the game would be a lot harder, and you would probably be getting bombarded way more often, and you wouldn't be able to take cover from anything. So that's sort of a glimpse into how level design can make a difference with that sort of stuff. But you know, you could also have a weapon that it also ignores the solid walls. So with that one, you could also shoot through to the enemies. Now, in our game, it would be a little too abusable because the enemies don't have pathfinding, but that's just kind of goes to my example again, where it's about the harmony, right? Where I wouldn't put that in this game because it'd be way too abusable, but if we just tweaked our enemies a little bit or had different types of enemies, then it would be fine. And like that being said, you know, we could have an enemy type that their bullets ignore walls, and maybe we could even have an enemy type that ignores walls altogether. You know, they could be like a ghost, or they could just be a floating enemy. So again, they're restricted by the solid walls, but they're not restricted by the pits in the water and stuff like that. You could have a weapon that shot like a bouncing bullet that did really, really heavy damage, but if a bouncing bullet were to fall into a pit, then you know, it would like disappear after that. So it actually can't go over those pits and in the water and stuff like that. So these are a bunch of different ways to sort of balance the gameplay and add to the core system that we have, which is just the cooldown based bullets. I know I brought up a lot of different topics, but again, the harmony is the important thing. And in fact, I would love to do a video just talking about this subject if anyone was interested in it, but I'm just going to be harping on it a little bit here because anytime you really want to get into like the core design of a game, and like if you're really passionate about the design itself, which by the way, if you don't focus on things like crazy like this, that's totally fine. You can make games if you prefer to keep them story heavy. You can make games for whatever reason you want to. That's the beauty of an interactive medium and the beauty of art in general. So you don't have to take everything I say to heart, or like, you know, you don't have to get unconfident in your game if it doesn't have these things, or if you don't want to think about these things. But I'm very much like a designer. Like, I really love game design, so that's what I'm going to talk about, and that's what I'm here to teach pretty much. So I say teach, more share knowledge. I wouldn't call myself knowledgeable enough to actually teach things, but I can be like that dude that you met in school, and he casually mentioned that he knows how to program in a bad game in Java, and you were like, what? That's crazy. Could you show me? And he's like, sure, kid. And then he does it. That's kind of like who I am, more than any kind of authority. So yeah, these are just my personal ramblings and my feelings on like game design and how things work. But I think they're pretty sound conclusions I've come to. I think about this stuff a lot. I love games. Now, I might change my mind over the years, and as I get more experienced, just as you probably should. But right now, this is what I think about things. So, but yeah. Anyways, back to it. So back to this first thing is, did we make a fun game? I think so, but to really crack its potential with what we've got, you know, we need to be a little creative with the level design. But I think more than anything, the enemies and the behavior of the bullets need to be amped up a little bit. Those are the areas that you want to focus on. Like, if you really want to make like a really good action game and you want to use this as a template, that's what I would suggest. I would suggest on focusing on enemies that can do interesting things, figuring out the rules that you have, and then maybe breaking those rules with some enemies and breaking those rules with some of the players' weapons and bullets and stuff like that. Because without the limited ammo thing, I think the best way that we could encourage players to swap weapons and have different weapons and things like that is just because they should be more beneficial in certain situations than others. I think right now the guns have a lot of overlap, and to be honest with you, I think the piercing effect that the pistol bullet has, I think that was the one that ended up with the piercing effect. I think that no matter how much I really balance the damage numbers there, I think that is it's just too good. But it's a good option to have. But compared to the other weapons that don't do the piercing damage, it's just better. When I play this game and I test it, I find myself just sticking with the pistol, and then occasionally just swapping because I get a little bored, or I think it would be fun to see the machine gun going crazy. But if we were to give the piercing ability to the machine gun as well, then regardless of its damage, either the pistol or the machine gun are going to be the better choice, because that goes back to they're too similar. That goes back to our DPS thing, where all that's different is a rate of fire, so you can't just make it better or worse with that, because then one of the two will become the obvious answer to always use. But we talked, we did examples of like having fanning bullets for the machine gun. Maybe having like a bunch of bullets in a big wide spread would make it really worthwhile. And then maybe making the shotgun, because it's such short range, maybe making it do way more damage and have the piercing effect. Maybe that would make that more viable too. So like, even without really having to add too much, I'm already kind of spitballing some ideas of how, using our exact existing systems, we could improve it. But yeah, I do mostly think that it comes to adding more content to the game that it makes it, substantially different. Adding strategy to the game, essentially. That was my very long way of explaining how to add strategy into a game like this. The different elements really have to play a part. Maybe having some weapons that reflect off of walls and bounce off of walls in certain ways and stuff like that could be very useful, and that could be a way around giving players something to do with a situation where they are covered in like the solid walls. Like, say they're in like a maze where the walls are all high and none of them are the invisible pitfall or water wall. There's lots of ways to figure it out, but I think that is the biggest design hurdle that you would have left if you want to do more work on this game in terms of that stuff. So could we have made it better in the series? I'll put a big old yes check mark next to that. But that just leaves you room to experiment and do the things that you want to do and try and make the game more fun in your way. Use some of the ideas that we just talked about a second ago. Maybe it sparked some ideas for you that are different. But yeah, so I mean, that's really that. And then sort of related to this, on the opposite side of design, is sort of the technical level. Is this game the best it can be on a technical level? Also, no, I'm pretty sure. I would say that just because I'm not a particularly great programmer myself, there's just no way that I did this optimally, and I don't want that to worry you. First of all, I don't want you to worry, because if you're not as good as me and I'm saying I'm bad, I'm not saying I'm bad. I can make games, so definitely don't put yourself down for that. But also don't worry, because I'm also not saying that I'm incompetent and you accidentally just followed a full series that made you worse at making games, because no, that's also not true. But I will say that there's a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me, a lot more talented. I've been programming for longer and are just better at it than me. They care more about programming and actual coding, and they've spent more time actually learning about it. People go to school for this stuff. Even people who didn't go to school for, like, a lot of hobbyists are better than me because they just love programming, and that's the thing that they love. I would not classify myself as that kind of person. I could talk about that design forever. I love game design. I'm not big on the programming. It's mostly just, we're all here, we're all friends, and we're all probably in the same exact boat, which is we probably don't have a lot of money to start paying programmers and artists and writers and things to help us with our games, so it's just us. And that's totally fine. If you did actually go through the series, then I hope you now have a lot of confidence in yourself, because you should. If you made it all the way through, then that's awesome. You are absolutely going to keep getting better, and you're going to make some cool games. 100%. I don't know exactly how long it was, but it was close to like a 13-hour long series, and if you stuck it out and got to the end, then you got it. But all that's to say is, my point is, no, this game that we have is not a perfect version of this game, and probably almost every step of the way, there's probably something that could be done slightly better, optimized more, a different method could be used, a method that I don't even know about, certain programming things that I'm unaware of. There's plenty of that stuff, and that's how my channel works too, In fact, every now and then I'll learn a couple things just by seeing some comments that some people have left. So yeah, I'm no authority. And that being said, even in the very last episode, there's an exact direct example where using a particle system would have been better overall than using our animated VFX as like objects. I won't go into too much detail because I explained it at the beginning of that video, but yeah, there are ways to improve it, and there's a bunch of things that I want to cover on this channel, a bunch of different subjects. But you know, in these series, the point is we want to make a game and we want to learn something every step of the way if we can. I think overloading the learning isn't great. I think going too fast isn't great. So I kind of have to do these like checks and balances on myself to make sure that I think I'm making better videos for people who actually want to watch them, which means that they're not going to be super clever and super efficient. And the thing is, I don't think you should start that way. I don't think you should start by making super clever and efficient games, because I think that's something that a lot of people get really tied up in, is making perfect programming and making a perfectly running game. You know, if you're running a game and you're checking the real frames per second and you are over 1200 frames per second, then in my opinion, I don't know how worth it is to spend a whole extra month working out a better, more optimized system that gets you up to 1800 frames per second. Now, feel free to disagree with me. That's totally fine. And I'm sure a lot of people really had a visceral reaction to hearing me say that. Like, what are you talking about, man? You just said you don't care about a 600 frame difference. And that is true. And it's important to optimize your games properly. It's important to make sure that they run well. But the thing is, when it comes to actually playing a game for a consumer is almost never going to see above conceivably 144 frames per second, maybe 240, maybe 360. And you know, for a lot of people, that's irregular. You might find more people with 120 hertz refresh rate monitors, but by far you're going to be seeing people with 60 hertz monitors, and you're going to be setting your game at 60 frames per second. So as long as you have some comfortable headroom there, you know, like if the real FPS of your game is just like a couple hundred, that's not great. If you're making a pixel art game, like really low resolution sprite art game in Game Maker, and you're getting really low FPS like that, then yeah, there's probably something wrong with your, you know, there's probably an issue with your game that you're not seeing, and you need to solve that and figure it out. But in my opinion, when you start fretting over the difference between what frame rates you're getting, whenever you're probably getting close to 1500 to 2500 to even higher than that, if you start fretting between those differences, then I want to say you're wasting time. Now, improving yourself is not wasting time. That's true. And that sort of just depends on the differences between like what your goals are. A lot of hobby programmers love programming. That's what they love to do. And things like super optimized systems are really important to them. People like that are immensely important, because if those people did not exist, we wouldn't even have things like Game Maker. We probably wouldn't even have 3D games, especially. We probably wouldn't have games in general, because games are a technical marvel in general, like how they even work and function in the first place. And the fact that computers can run games 60 times every single second is not just a testament to the hardware, but the software programmers, the people working with it. So those people are extremely important. But is that your goal? Is that what you are wanting to do? If you want to make games, and you want to make games that people can play, and you care about designing games, or say you just care about telling stories, or making a cool interactive thing with a bunch of music, or just your artwork, that kind of thing, if that's what you care about, then it's okay to make the game that we made on a technical level. You know, like I said, there's lots of ways to improve it, and you're still going to need to be, try and be as clever as possible while you're adding new things to it. But the thing is, if your game runs fine on a kind of okay computer, like an average computer, if you're not having performance problems with it there visually, like if you gave it to someone who knows nothing about the code in the game and they were to play it and there weren't issues with it, they won't be able to tell if it's twice as optimized, if it's already optimized enough to work with your games, right? In a perfect world, it would be great if you could run your game on the crappiest little $120 laptop in the world, you know? And the thing is, you know, maybe it can if your game is already simple enough in the first place. But the fact of the matter is, most people who play games on their computer have at least a fine laptop or a fine desktop. I'm not even talking about like, you know, people with gamer PCs and gamer laptops and stuff like that. It's just that most people just have like a fine laptop, you know? And if your game can run without a stutter on a fine laptop, then it doesn't make a difference to, you know, 95% of people who are going to be playing your game. And if your game is great on launch and it runs fine on launch, then computers are only going to be getting better, and the average computer is only going to be getting better. So you shouldn't have too many issues keeping up, you know, porting it, remastering it, you know, whatever it is you want to do with it. then you're gonna be totally good. So while our game on a technical level is not as good as it could be, I personally think where we are right now, the difference is it doesn't really need to be improved too much. Whereas I would argue that, you know, for the design of your game, you do want to improve it a little bit. And now, of course, this is me totally ignoring the fact that there are probably some bugs in this, some actual bugs, you know, not just performance related, but so that's sort of the second part of this this technical talk, the performance talk, is that yeah, there's probably some little bugs. It was a very long series, and it took me a long time to draft it up and plan it out and outline the videos. So I spent a good amount of time bug testing, but the thing is, when it comes to making games and software and stuff like that, bugs so often just show up way after you're testing for them, or in circumstances that you just didn't think about testing, or when you add new things. So there probably are some bugs in there. And hopefully, if you watch the series, now you're well enough equipped to fix them yourself and troubleshoot them yourself, especially when it came to things like restarting the rooms and game overs and room transitions for the bonus episode and stuff like that. Those kind of things can have issues that you wouldn't necessarily think of until you find the issues, you know? Now, in that bonus 14th episode, there are like moments that I have where I actually fix a couple of those things. But so again, hopefully that should actually give you the tools to help fix that stuff if you need to. But yeah, so I definitely do apologize for that though, if there are bugs, which again, I'm sure there are some little issues here. But again, I don't think there are any fundamental issues that would make anything in the series obsolete. You know, just stuff that might need a little hot fix, basically, just a line of code that was overlooked or something like that. But I think the core of the game is really solid. So on that level, I think you should be fine. And if you even want to make edits to the core stuff, you know, hopefully now you're sort of like in the right direction and you can just do that yourself and experiment with stuff. You can just do the freaking, go to the top left, man, go to save as, save it as something else, and then just mess around with it. And you can always go back to the other project at any time you want to. I do that. But on this subject of, you know, there's probably a couple bugs. It's not the most optimized thing in the world. There's probably other methods to do things better. That is all still true. I'm not trying to absolve myself from being responsible for not really giving you the most like perfect thing I could. Like I said, I do think I wanted to just prioritize making it as understandable as possible, so using some simpler methods in certain places. However, you should still want to get better at programming. And for that, the biggest thing is use other people's resources, not just me. Use my videos as a resource. And I know you probably already have, since you're someone trying to learn game development and stuff like that. But every now and then I'll get, you know, messages from people saying that they ultimately landed on my videos because they were the easiest to understand for them personally, which is great. But if you're one of those people and you're here now and you finished that How to Make a Top-Down Shooter series and you went through the whole thing, you probably aren't that person anymore. You probably can go watch tons of other people now. Sean Spalding is amazing, does great stuff, so many different resources for so many different things, always staying on top of Game Maker stuff. About 7 years ago, when I was first learning how to make video games, I knew nothing about programming, didn't know anything about making games at all. I just really wanted to make one. Sean Spalding was one of the resources that I used all the time to start learning, all the way back then, and he's still going strong, stronger than ever. Great stuff, talented, cool, smart person. It's great. Another great resource for clever and smart programming, like being able to see like good stuff and seeing cool things that can be done with Game Maker. Matharu, great channel. Normally pretty short videos, but they're very dense, very informative. Depending on the topic, they can be a little bit harder to sort of discern and follow along with, just because they're shorter and they're faster and they're dense again. But again, now that you're at this point, you can probably follow along with a lot of that stuff really easily, and they're great videos. Does a lot of really interesting stuff and talks about certain specific topics that can help you learn more about programming. You know, it's not just like a lot of my videos, which is how to make X. He just has videos that are just like, you know, this thing in Game Maker, you know, like a video just on structs and constructors, the difference between that and object-oriented programming and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely check out his videos. If you still happen to find them a little bit intimidating at this point, start watching other people and then come back to his. You know, another great resource that I used to use a lot when I was learning was a Heartbeast. I don't think he does anything with Game Maker anymore, but I do think he uses He does a lot of stuff with Godot. I believe he has some like paid for courses and stuff like that on like Udemy and things like that. Good videos, very good teacher. I used his videos a lot when I first started. But again, there's tons of other people. There's a Friendly Cosmonaut has done a few things that are really informative. I've watched a couple of her videos. They're very good, very, very good. And then there's just some others that I haven't really used personally, but I'm sure they're great. One Up Indie is one. Pixelated Pope, I see those a lot. Again, for them specifically, I couldn't personally vouch for them, but I imagine that they're pretty great resources considering the amount of people that watch their videos and all that stuff. So yeah, and again, you probably knew all this. You've probably seen all these people before, but maybe you ultimately fell upon me, and this is your first project that you've been doing. And so, if that is true, then now you should be very prepared and ready to go learn from other people, especially because now you probably have more of like a dictionary, like a lexicon, to actually look up the things that you're looking for. You know, you're not necessarily just looking up for how to make a platformer, but maybe you're looking up how to double jump or how to control the height of your jump. Maybe you're looking up how to wall climb, wall jump, momentum, all that kind of stuff, you know? Like hopefully you're kind of ready for looking into those sort of things, and you can use those resources that I would say are better than me. So yeah, definitely watch other people. Definitely keep watching my videos too. I would appreciate that. But yeah. Another thing is I try to keep up with YouTube as much as I can, but it is a big time sink. This series was very difficult to make and took a very long time. And my number one thing is making games and releasing games. So I go periods of time without putting up new videos. I don't think I'll ever abandon this channel because I just enjoy doing it too much, but there will be times where I can't do a video every week. I don't have that time with the other stuff that I'm doing. So make use of the people who can post that often, but also make use of just the fact that there's so much knowledge before this point in time right now that you're listening to this. No matter when you're listening to this, there's a million videos that you haven't watched by other people that are all good. So definitely do that. That's important. But yeah, so I guess I'll do one more little part of the discussion, just kind of talk about making it, I guess, or the design decisions that I made initially. We already talked about like the shooting and stuff like that, but let's talk about some extra things, I guess. I don't know. The main reason that I decided to actually do this series in the first place is because I wanted to sort of test the waters for the inevitable turn-based RPG video, which you probably heard me mention on different occasions in different places, but that's going to be a huge task. It's going to be a real difficult series to make because turn-based RPGs are pretty complicated. And you might not think they are, but they are. So I figured starting with a purely action-based game would probably be a lot easier. And I wanted to learn a lot from this experience of making a really long series like this, really in-depth. And I did learn a lot. I think I'll be able to make the next one much more efficiently, not just in terms of my time, but in terms of the way I explain things. I've recently made some tools for visualizing concepts and ideas in GameMaker better than me just having to explain something for like 45 seconds to 5 minutes. I could just show this diagram and it immediately explains itself way better than I can. So yeah, so that's cool. A lot of that stuff was made specifically after this, and I was like, I felt like I had to explain this a bunch of times, or like I felt like I'd explained this way too long. So, but anyways, yeah, so I just kind of decided to make it for that reason, and I just figured it would be a kind of game that a lot of people, for beginners, would want to play and start. So I just sort of decided to make it balance, like as much depth in it that I could, you know, as much like different things and things that would be like basic questions people would have about it. Again, the two different types of walls was a big one that I wanted to focus on. Having multiple weapons, swapping weapons, and have them do different things was a big deal. So yeah, both of those things are what ended up ultimately deciding to do like the intelligent damage system. So intelligent in quotation marks. Intelligent compared to how we started. Again, there's probably people who really scoffed at that and were like, dude, that was the worst programming I've ever seen. So I'm sorry if that's the case, but again, it works and it does exactly what I wanted it to, which was fix a lot of the issues that we talked about that it had in the series. And that was one of those things that I didn't want to put on you guys as like, okay, well, now you figure it out. I did the really easy part, so now you just, you figure out how to make it much, much, much better. So that was one time where it needed to be its own topic for sure in this series. So yeah, that ultimately made it a lot longer than I was thinking it was going to be. It ultimately ended up being like 2 or almost even 3 times longer than I was hoping the series would be. I didn't really want it to be so long. I wish it was more concise, but yeah, it took a really long time to record. It was about 30 hours of footage, which was taken over the course of over 40 hours of recording. Because when I started the series, at one point, I actually lost a ton of footage because of a technical issue that I had. I lost about 6 or 7 hours of footage. And then little little things like that happened every now and then amongst the 30 hours of recorded footage that it had. So yeah, it took a long time to do. Took a really long time to edit all of that footage down properly. So yeah, pretty exhausting, but I'm pretty proud of what we have here. But hopefully next time I do it better and shorter and record for less time. But I mean, otherwise making it was really fun. I like making games. I am a Game Boy after all. But yeah, I mean, do I even have anything else relevant to say? Has any of this even been that important at all? Not really. Hopefully there were some things in this little video thingy here that got you thinking. I do realize it was mostly rambling, but I did not want to take the time to like outline it or really like write down my thoughts on stuff. I kind of just wanted to talk freely about it. I think this would be a fun thing to do for the series videos. And, you know, if enough people decide to watch this video and you have comments or questions or concerns about the top-down shooter series as a whole, then you can just, like, ask them here and I'll try and respond to a bunch of stuff. Or if there's enough questions in general, I might just do a second discussion video to continue capping it off. Maybe even like a stream or something. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, anyways, I hope you're doing great. Thank you so much for watching. I'm quite tired and I was hoping to get this video done really fast, so I consider this more akin to one of the update videos, so I'm not going to edit all of the Patreon stuff at the end. But I am very appreciative of all of my patrons. You guys are amazing. You're amazing too if you're listening to this. Anyone listening to this is very cool, very probably strong and mysterious, and probably has like tribal tattoos. So good on you and you have my respect. But otherwise, see you around, I guess. Okay, bye-bye.